The atmosphere around Ibrox has always been built on passion, loyalty, and moments that define generations, and few modern stories connected to the club carry as much emotional weight as the journey of Steven Gerrard. When he first arrived in Glasgow, the challenge in front of him was enormous. Rangers were chasing stability, chasing credibility, and above all chasing the league title that had slipped away for far too long. What followed under his leadership was not just improvement, it was transformation. Step by step, season by season, he built a team that became resilient, organized, and mentally strong, culminating in that unforgettable, unbeaten league campaign that supporters will talk about for decades. It wasn't just about winning the title, it was about how it was done, with authority, pride, and a sense that Rangers were truly back where they belonged. Looking back now, the timing of his departure in 2021 feels like one of those moments in football that changes everything. At the time, the move to the English Premier League seemed like a natural progression for a manager whose reputation was rising rapidly. The opportunity to manage in one of the most competitive leagues in the world is something that very few managers would turn down, and from the outside, it looked like a logical step in a growing career. But football decisions are rarely simple, and with the benefit of distance and experience, the situation now looks far more complicated than it did back then. There is a growing sense that perhaps the project at Rangers still had unfinished chapters, and that the story could have gone in a very different direction if he had stayed just a little longer. What makes this situation particularly fascinating is the honesty that has come out in recent reflections. There is no attempt to rewrite history or pretend everything was perfect. Instead, there is a clear acknowledgement that maybe the jump came too soon, that the difference in level, pressure, and expectation was greater than anticipated. Managing a club where every match feels like a final is one thing, but stepping into a league where every week you face world-class managers, massive budgets, and relentless media scrutiny is something entirely different. That transition can be brutal, even for the most prepared coaches, and sometimes experience is the only teacher that truly prepares someone for that environment. At the same time, the situation inside Rangers during that period was not as straightforward as many supporters might have believed. Winning the league often hides underlying issues, and success can sometimes create as many problems as it solves. Expectations rise, budgets become a bigger talking point, recruitment becomes more important than ever, and the pressure to repeat success immediately can be overwhelming. There were clearly questions about how the club would build on that title-winning season, whether the squad would be strengthened enough, and whether the momentum would continue or level off. Those uncertainties can play a major role when a manager is deciding his future, especially when another club arrives with promises of resources and a new challenge. When you think about it now, it really does feel like one of those sliding doors moments in football. If he had stayed, could Rangers have dominated for several seasons? Could European runs have gone even further? Could a long-term dynasty have been built with that core of players who had already proven they could handle pressure and deliver results? These are questions that will never have definitive answers, but they remain fascinating to consider because football history often turns on decisions like these. One choice, one contract, one conversation can completely change the direction of a career and a club. What also adds another layer to this entire story is the idea that football always gives second chances, but they do not always arrive at the right time or in the right circumstances. There are moments when paths almost cross again, when returns seem possible, when stories look like they might come full circle, and yet something always changes at the last moment. That sense of unfinished business is something that supporters often feel just as strongly as managers or players, because certain eras create emotional connections that go far beyond results and trophies. They become part of the identity of the club and the supporters who lived through those seasons. While all of this reflection continues, the club itself is once again approaching a period of important decisions, particularly when it comes to leadership within the squad. Few players in recent years have represented consistency and leadership more than the club captain, who has been a central figure both on the pitch and in the dressing room for a long time. His influence stretches beyond performances, beyond statistics, and into the culture and standards that define the team. Players like that are not easy to replace, not just because of their ability, but because of their presence and understanding of what the club demands every single week. However, football is always moving forward, and every club eventually reaches moments where it must balance loyalty with long-term planning. Age, contracts, wages, squad evolution, and future recruitment all become part of difficult conversations that are not always visible to supporters. From the outside, it may seem like a simple decision to extend a contract, but internally there are always many factors being considered, including how the squad will look in 2 or 3 years rather than just next season. These are the decisions that shape the future of a team, and sometimes they lead to emotional departures that nobody really wanted, but everyone eventually understands. As the weeks pass and uncertainty remains, speculation naturally begins to grow. When experienced players approach the final stages of their contracts, interest from other leagues often appears, especially from clubs that can offer attractive financial packages and a different lifestyle. For players who have already achieved a great deal in their careers, those opportunities can be very difficult to ignore, particularly when they may represent the final major contract of their playing days. This creates a situation where loyalty, ambition, financial security, and the desire for a new experience all collide at the same time, making decisions incredibly complicated for everyone involved. Behind the scenes at Ibrox, situations like this are rarely simple and almost never resolved quickly, because when you are dealing with a long-serving captain, you are not just negotiating with a player, you are negotiating with a symbol of an era. Over the years, he has delivered goals, assists, leadership, and consistency from a position where that kind of attacking output is extremely rare. Supporters have watched him lift trophies, lead the team in difficult moments, and carry responsibility season after season. That kind of influence cannot be measured only in numbers, and it certainly cannot be replaced overnight by signing a younger player with potential. Experience, leadership, and understanding of the club's expectations take years to build, not months. At the same time, football clubs cannot afford to stand still, and this is where the situation becomes delicate. The club must think about the future of the squad, the wage structure, the development of younger players, and the long-term strategy for competing domestically and in Europe. Extending a contract for a player in the later stage of his career always involves risk, because performance levels can drop quickly in football, and squads need to evolve continuously to remain competitive. So the decision is never purely emotional, even when the player involved has given so much to the club. It becomes a balancing act between respect for what has been achieved and responsibility for what comes next. If the negotiations continue to drag on, it inevitably creates uncertainty, and uncertainty in football often leads to transfers. Other clubs watch these situations very closely, especially when there is a possibility of signing an experienced player on a free transfer. For teams in emerging leagues or clubs looking for leadership and experience, a player with years of European football and title-winning experience becomes a very attractive opportunity. Add to that the possibility of a strong financial offer, and suddenly the decision becomes even more complicated. Football careers are short, and players have to think about their future beyond the game as well. From the club's perspective, planning for a possible departure is simply part of modern football management. Recruitment departments are always analyzing potential replacements months or even years in advance, especially for key positions. The right-back role in modern football is no longer just a defensive position. It requires stamina, tactical intelligence, crossing ability, and often goal contributions as well. Finding a player who can develop into that role long-term is not easy, which is why scouting and loan systems have become so important. Young players gaining experience in the league, adapting to the physical and tactical demands of Scottish football, often become ideal candidates to step into bigger roles later. This is why there has been increasing attention on younger options who could represent the next generation in that position. Bringing in a younger player does not necessarily mean the captain leaves immediately, but it often signals a transition period where experience and youth overlap for a season before a full change happens. That is usually the most stable way to rebuild a position, allowing the younger player to learn while the experienced player still contributes. But again, all of this depends on contracts, timing, and the decisions made over the next few months. What makes this entire situation even more interesting is how quickly football can change. A player can look certain to leave and then sign a new contract at the last minute. A club can plan for a replacement and then decide to extend a deal after all. Interest from other teams can appear suddenly, and change everything in a matter of days. Supporters often only see the final announcement, but behind every contract extension or transfer, there are weeks or months of discussions, financial calculations, and strategic planning. For the supporters, these moments are always emotional because they are not just watching players come and go, they are watching eras begin and end. Every successful period at a football club is usually defined by a core group of players who stay together long enough to build something meaningful. When those players start to leave one by one, it signals the end of a cycle and the beginning of another. That does not mean decline, but it does mean change, and change always brings uncertainty as well as opportunity. Over the next period, decisions made by the club will likely shape the direction of the team for several seasons, not just the next one. Recruitment, contract renewals, potential departures, and managerial decisions are all connected. And when you look back at successful teams, you often realize that their dominance was not built in one transfer window, but over several years of smart planning and difficult decisions. Rangers now appear to be approaching one of those important transitional moments where the choices made behind the scenes could define the next era at Ibrox, and supporters will be watching very closely to see how the story unfolds. There is also the dressing room factor, which many people outside the club often underestimate. When a long-serving captain is part of the squad, he becomes a bridge between the coaching staff and the players, between new signings and the culture of the club, and between pressure and stability during difficult periods of the season. Losing that kind of presence is not just about replacing a right back on the pitch. It is about replacing a voice, a personality, and a leader who understands exactly what it means to play for Rangers. That kind of leadership is built over years of big matches, title races, European nights, and intense rivalries, and it cannot simply be bought in the transfer market. At the same time, every player eventually reaches a moment in his career where he must think about what comes next, and those decisions are never easy. Staying at a club where you are loved and respected offers emotional security and legacy, but moving abroad can offer financial security and a new life experience for both the player and his family. When players reach their mid-30s, they start to think not only as footballers, but as people planning the next stage of their lives. That is why these contract situations often take longer than expected, because the decision is not only about football, it is about life, family, and the future. From the supporter's perspective, the uncertainty can be frustrating, but it also shows how important the player still is to the club. If he were not important, the decision would be quick and simple. The fact that there are long discussions, internal debates, and careful planning shows that the club understands the magnitude of the decision they are making. Whether he stays or leaves, it will mark a significant moment because players who define an era do not leave quietly. They leave a legacy behind them that new players are expected to live up to. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to get all the exclusive news about Rangers FC. Don't overlook any details about your beloved team. It's crucial for Rangers FC fans. A shockwave is rumbling through the Scottish Premiership as whispers grow louder that a standout figure from Heart of Midlothian could be on the brink of a sensational switch to Rangers. Sources close to the situation suggest the deal is edging toward completion, with only the formal approval of a new investor said to be holding things back from becoming official. Around Tynecastle, there's a growing sense of unease. The player in question has been nothing short of pivotal, a driving force who's captured the admiration of supporters with consistency and grit. Losing such a presence would undoubtedly leave a void, both on the pitch and in the dressing room. Yet, in football, ambition and opportunity often pull stronger than loyalty alone. Over in Glasgow, the mood is markedly different. There's a quiet but undeniable buzz building among the Rangers faithful. Bringing in a proven Premiership talent from a domestic rival would not only strengthen the squad, but also send a clear message of intent. It's the kind of move that shifts momentum, the sort that fans dream about during long campaigns. What makes this situation even more intriguing is the reported involvement of a new financial backer. Insiders hint that this investor's signature is the final piece of the puzzle, suggesting that broader changes may be underway behind the scenes. If confirmed, it could signal a new chapter of spending power and strategic ambition for Rangers. Still, nothing is signed yet, and in Scottish football, deals have been known to twist at the final hurdle. Heart of Midlothian are unlikely to let their star depart without a fight, and there remains hope among supporters that something could yet change. For now, it remains a story of almost, but in the world of football rumors, almost often means imminent. The coming hours could prove decisive, and all eyes are firmly fixed on what happens next. Greetings, fans. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as it's greatly appreciated by Rangers FC. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments section below. Until the next video, stay tuned.